You get pressure from yourself.
Yeah.
Mainly from myself, because I'm particularly hard on myself. From your parents, your coach, the press. You know, people know that you're up there and you're in the lead. That pressure's enough, because you're thinking, well, okay, if I lose the lead, you know, those are the sorts of things that go through your head. So you have it from all sorts of areas, but I think that, you know, my faith gives me perspective, and and then I focus on that rather than all the other interferences from other people, really.
Welcome back to a Christians in Sport podcast, the podcast which exists to help sports people think through some of the big questions about sport and the Christian faith. And I've got a real treat today. We're going to look at the topic of how we handle pressure. There are a few bigger compliments for a sports person than to say that they perform under pressure or they're a big game player, but conversely, it can be absolutely devastating if somebody's described as being someone who chokes, a chokers. But we want to look at, why does pressure have such an effect on us? How can we cope with it? And does the Bible give us any pointers as we look at this real interesting and rich topic? So I've got two women who know all about pressure with me. I've got Ali Nicholas, a US Open golf champion, 18 professional wins in total. She's also played in, get this, 6 Solheim Cups before going on to vice captain twice and then captain the team twice in 2009, 2011. Needless to say, she's played under pressure. And then I've got Debbie Flood, a rower who competed in 4 Olympic Games, silver medals twice, winning 3 World Championship golds. And then in 2012, she was appointed captain of the Leander Club, one of the oldest, the most successful rowing clubs in the world, becoming its first female captain. So I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be great. Welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us. Ali first. Let's go there. Golf, I dabble very, very poorly in golf, but it's full of little pressure moments, isn't it? And then in your career, there's been some massive ones. So tell us maybe about the time you felt most under pressure in your sport.
I think really it was probably the US Open. You know, I'm coming into that, I'm leading by 3 shots, and you know, I'm feeling it. You know, I want to win it, but obviously you know, you feel nervous going into that day, and I didn't sleep particularly well, and you know, you're thinking, oh, you know, I hope I play well, I don't want to disgrace myself and all that sort of stuff. So that's probably the moment. But I would also go back and say that my first win, because it took me 7 attempts, second place finishes to win. So, you know, I didn't handle it particularly well initially.
Debs, what about you? When were you most under pressure?
There's so many different pressures and so many different pressure times I can think of, but probably the most pressured moment for me in my sport was at the London 2012 Games. That was the end of my career, so the last games that I was going to be competing in. And we had not made it through our heat to the final. And basically had one last chance to make our home Olympic final through what's called the repechage in rowing. We had to make the top 4, otherwise that was it, no home final. And we'd also have been the only British boat not to have made our home final. So a lot of pressure. We hadn't had a good run-up. I'd had lots of injuries in the run-up. And at that point after our heat, we were also the slowest on paper.
Wow. So two major pressure moments. And if you're listening and now you're gonna have your own. You're gonna be, when we ask that question, you're gonna flash back to whatever it might be for you. But both of you here with me today, Christians, you follow Jesus. This podcast is called the Christians in Sport podcast. If you're listening now, and you can listen back to both these guys in previous podcasts, they talk about their faith and their careers. But listening in now, someone might quite rightly be saying, in some ways, so what? Your faith is your faith and your sport is your sport. What on earth does your faith have to say about pressure? Does it have anything to say in it? Or is it just some people are better wired at it than others, or than better equipped? Ali, maybe going to you first then. How would you say your faith in Jesus affected how you dealt with that pressure?
I think it puts things in perspective for me. You know, I mean, it's not a big thing. And I think the trouble is we can identify ourselves by our performance, or it defines you. And for me, I'm in Christ, so Christ defines me. So whatever happens, I can put that in perspective. It doesn't matter, because I'm in Christ. You know, I've got all that I need. My salvation is set, and I can relax in that. I don't think that was an easy transition for me to take that and grasp that completely. It's been a process, but I think that and then looking at the Bible, some of the scriptures that I concentrated on were 2 Timothy 1:7, which was, for God gave us a spirit not of fear but of power, love and sound mind. So I used to, continually look at those scriptures and remember them and repeat them to myself. But it took me a while to realise that actually my worth is in Christ rather than in my performance. Basically.
Does that affect every factor to do with pressure? Because there's lots of things which pile pressure on us, don't they? There is our performance, but then there could be, I don't know, family. It could be just the pressure for sponsorship, or just to keep funding. I don't know, maybe in other sports that'll be the case.
Yeah, I mean, you get pressure from yourself.
Yeah.
Mainly from myself, because I'm particularly hard on myself. From your parents, your coach, the press. People know that you're up there and you're in the lead. That pressure's enough, because you're thinking, well, okay, if I lose the lead, those are the sorts of things that go through your head. So you have it from all sorts of areas, but I think that my faith gives me perspective, and and then I focus on that rather than all the other interferences from other people, really.
Debbie, what about for you? How did that in that moment, London 2012, the whole of the country watching in some senses, what difference, if any, did it make?
I think, the word that Ali used in terms of perspective is a really good word. For me, my sport, the whole of my sport, my abilities, my opportunities, I really, when I got involved in rowing to start with, even, I knew that was a gift from God. Actually, that was something to be enjoyed, something to work hard with. And I think for me, that perspective of knowing that God has given me these opportunities, given me the abilities, and wants me just to get stuck in, embrace life, is an amazing place to be able to love your sport. And we all know, as sports people, don't we, that the pressures, whether it be from the outside, from friends, family, media, or from ourselves, or the what ifs, or the what ifs of funding, or the what ifs, all the things that can go around in our minds can rob us of that joy of our sport, and also, rob us of the ability just to feel free, just to do it. You can feel so oppressed and suppressed by pressures, can't you? So for me, it's always coming back to the fact that God has enabled me. He's ordained me to be here at this moment, at this time in my life, and he's with me in it. And being able to have that perspective in that, my worth and my value is not in how well I do. Of course, I want to do well. I'm a competitive athlete. I want to get out there. I want to show what I'm made of. I want to do it well. But ultimately, when that race is done, God's view of me doesn't change whether I win or whether I lose. And it's a learning process. God shows you that over the years as you walk with him, because I certainly struggled with lots of things more at the beginning of my rowing career than I did at the end. That was the most pressured point at the end of my career, but at that point I'd learned a lot. God had taught me a lot about where my worth was, where my security lay in him. It didn't mean that sport wasn't important, but actually it wasn't as important of knowing who I am in him.
Yeah, and I think that's important, isn't it? It's still important. It's got value. Sport, if God gave sport as a gift, it's got value. And maybe, I don't know if there's a sense that there's healthy and there's unhealthy pressure. One of the reasons maybe we love sport is the pressure. It is part of that. Can I perform? Can I use these gifts I've been given? And we love, maybe even in reps, we love those moments. How do you reflect on that, on sort of the difference between healthy and unhealthy pressure?
Yeah, I think that unhealthy pressure is when it turns into anxiety, and it robs you of performance. You can't perform when you're anxious, and so it's there is positive pressure where you can perform, and you just embrace it. I think for me, I used to try and just embrace the pressure, enjoy it. This is what I'm here for. This is what I worked hard for. Go. God's given you that gift. Go and do it and enjoy. I think sometimes, I know when I really struggled to win, because I could look at the leaderboard and I'm thinking, oh, no. So it was, and then I'd react and I'd get all tense and anxious, and then I'd rush my shots, and obviously then my performance was compromised. So I had to learn that through hardship in some way, because I wasn't getting it. And then someone just had a chat with me, said, just embrace it, Al, enjoy it. This is what you're here for. Enjoy the feelings. So whereas when I didn't win, it turned into anxiety, therefore I made a mess of it. And then I learned to embrace it. And it's not an easy thing to do, because it's such a fine line. But obviously, in terms of my faith, that helped me enormously to bring things in perspective and to understand that actually, I'm here for a purpose. That God's made me, and He's obviously made me to play good golf. So just get on with it. And I think sometimes, I used to get really edgy, but I learnt to, as I said, embrace the whole thing. But I've been at both sides of it, because I've made a mess of it, and I've also come out the other end. So it is a learning process a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely is a learning process. I think for me, my faith has been a big part of my motivation as well. So, I want to do well, but also I want to honour God with the opportunities and abilities He's given me. So it almost makes me more competitive in a way, because I want to go out there. I want to, do the best of my abilities. But I think the line is that if you feel like you have to win, in order to maybe justify the time you're spending doing your sport, or in order to feel like you're successful or feel like you have worth, then that's the danger point. I think, where's your heart at? What are you desperate for? Like, we can long to win, but is that the biggest thing that we're longing for? Do we need that acknowledgement or worth or success from our sport? Because at the end of the day, we all know sport, don't we? And you can go from hero to zero overnight in a disappointment or in an injury. And even if you get your absolute best on the day, if someone else does better, they win. So there is no guarantees in sport. All you can do is your absolute best and throw off everything that hinders you. And those things are often the worries and the anxieties that can tie you up in knots. So I think for me, I could still play to win. I can still row to win. I want to go out and win, but actually I don't have to win to justify myself or the reason I'm there or my worth in that end result.
Right. I want both. Let's try and get a bit practical on, as in both you're part of our elite sport team here at Christian Sport. You meet with athletes, those who know Christ, those who don't know Christ, and you point towards Jesus. But firstly, I want you to zoom back in 2012, day of that repechage, US Open, third round finished. Practically, what are you doing to help remind yourselves of these things, to help in some ways free yourself to embrace the pressures you've talked about? What does that look like for you, Debs? Repechage, morning of, I presume?
Yeah, I think the morning of, for me, was more simple. So the morning of, I knew, and again, I'd learnt the best way to start my race days. By that point, that was 15 years. I'd been racing internationally for Great Britain. And for me, I knew that I needed to wake with a thankful heart, thankful for the opportunity, for being there and for my abilities. Then give all my concerns and worries to God, realise that pressure and heaviness is not going to help in any way. And then simply get out there, work hard and do what I do. I just tried to really keep it simple on that race day. For me, the troubles was kind of the week run up. You have a week between your heat and the final, and it's that battle in the mind of needing to kind of take those thoughts captive and continually giving them to God, because they come back and they come back and they come back. You're surrounded by people, you're surrounded by the Brits cheering you down when you go down to training, there are people sending you messages. So I think for me, it's that constant need to come back to God in prayer, to be reminded of the truths you need reminding of. But then the race day for me was relatively simple in a sense. You learn as an athlete how to be focused, and I knew what my race day needed to look like with God as well.
What about for you, Ali? On that, I presume it's a fourth round morning. You're 3 shots in the lead, are you?
Yeah, and you're not teeing off till quite late. So you've got
you're watching everyone else go out, aren't you?
Yeah. So you've got the morning to sort yourself out, and basically you just wake up when you wake up. And I was sharing an apartment with two friends of mine who were married, and they were Christians. So we prayed together, and someone put a note in my locker with 2 Timothy 1:7, which I mentioned before, which was, God gives you a spirit not of fear but of power, love and sound mind, and I concentrated on that. We also had a Bible study earlier in the week by a guy called Al Egg, who interesting name, but he was a pastor who supported some of the US teams in college, and he just said, don't sweat the small stuff. So I was thinking, if you put it in perspective, it's quite small. Other people are struggling in life, people in hospital and this and that, and there's lots of suffering in the world. So I just tried to concentrate. Don't sweat the small, small stuff. I kept saying to myself every time, and reminding myself that this is just a small part of life, and it's not that big a deal. But and my caddy was brilliant. I've got a caddy alongside me who helps me from that point of view, and he just made me laugh most of the morning and the afternoon when I was about to tee off. So it just released that pressure, and if you smile, it releases endorphins, doesn't it? And you start to relax a little bit, and then you go into performance mode after that. So all you're thinking about really once you've teed off is your processes and routines.
Was there any sort of Solheim Cup, the sort of the team-based competition, the equivalent in the men's side of the Ryder Cup, and you captained that twice? How did that? Was that easier because you were later on in your career? You're not playing, or was that harder because you're responsible for all these girls who are about to go out and compete for Europe?
Yeah, it was harder because I can't do anything about it. As a player, you can actually go and perform and get on with it and do something about it. You've got to sit back and let them go and just trust them. So I found it really hard from that point of view because there's nothing you can do. But, the most important thing from me and certainly for my team is to see me relaxed and enjoy myself so that really had an influence on them.
Yeah, and probably similar for you, Debs, because you're in a boat. You've got 3 other girls you're rowing with. How did they find it? Because they were probably incredibly nervous. I'd find was it quite striking for them that you were able to compete with this sort of freedom?
Yeah, I think that's been the kind of case throughout the years, really, both in how I approached racing, but also how I dealt with the results afterwards. Of course, I'd be disappointed and gutted if we hadn't done well, but then the ability to then put perspective into that and to keep moving forward with a good outlook, really. Again, so many of the rowers I've raced with, sometimes finish the sport feeling a failure because they haven't achieved what they had specifically wanted to. However, representing at an international level on that stage is in no way a failure for anyone, no matter the results. And so, yeah, it was definitely something, I think hopefully it seemed to be that my crew drew confidence in the fact that I could be confident as well. And as a crew, it doesn't matter if only one of you is in a good place. Actually, you all need to be, ready to race and in the best place possible. So, for me as part of that team was to try and help others, see the positives and see what they're capable of and gel together well as a team to perform.
And now, both of you, we've mentioned this before, you work for our elite team, you travel around the country, you travel around the world, sometimes meeting with people right at the top of their game now, right at the top of their sport, whatever their sport is in some senses. Let's go into one of those rooms, one of those Bible studies you mentioned at Ali, sort of the week of the event. What are some of the things you're doing in those Bible studies to support those you're working with? They're really highly pressurized situations often. It could be World Championship Athletics, it could be World Rowing Champs or for the Olympics or on major golf tournaments. What are some of the things you're doing? What are you pointing towards? What truths of the Bible, what truths of God are you pointing towards to help them have perspective, as you both talked about?
For me, a big part of it is pointing them towards the fact that how incredible it is that they're there, that they're able to represent their country, to remind them of all the things that are great about that. And because it's very easy to, like I was saying earlier, to just get consumed with the results of what's going to happen or the what ifs, but actually just to start from a place of thankfulness to God, for the gifts, the abilities, for the opportunities, and that is the best place to start, and to honour him in going forward and keep him central in that. I think for me, for athletes and people that I work with now, it's recognizing our thoughts as well, recognizing what we're thinking, recognizing that whether we're getting carried away down one level, and it's keeping it balanced, so keeping us humble. We're under God, and we acknowledge and thank him for what we have in him. That is actually the most important thing that we can have. We have Jesus, and that should be an amazing place to start, and then being able to just get out and do what we're capable of doing. You've worked hard all of that time. We don't want to be robbed of that by things that come in that cause anxieties or cause us to worry and get stuck in a place that God doesn't want us to be. He promises that if we give our cares to him, give our worries to him, that he can give us the peace, that transcends all that chaos, even amongst, if there is chaos, he can give us a real peace. So I always would, every circumstance is different, and the individuals we work with are different, and their individual struggles, so you can point them back to God's wisdom with whatever they may be struggling with.
I think that's key. That's key, isn't it? We don't want someone listening in to go, being nervous is wrong. It is that, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Ali, it's when that seeps into anxiety or really unhealthy worry, concern, or overdue pressure, isn't it? Is that right to think that we just, as in, is that just part of the sport, part of what you'd be saying to these guys as you've met with them beforehand, Ali?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all human, aren't we? So you have emotions, and nerves is part of that, really. And I try and sort of point them to, again, identity in Christ, that whatever happens, put the whole thing in perspective, that God still loves you, and that's the most important thing, and try and clear that path of all those blockages that get in the way, because we sometimes often bargain with God, don't we, in our sports performance, and say, well, if I do this, will you do this for me? And actually we don't want to go there. We want to clear that path because of the grace and the gift that Christ has given us through going to the cross. We've got our salvation, so we're in Christ, and really just pray with them. But listen to them too, because you do have concerns, you do get anxious, but just to try and put them into perspective and pray with them, and just say, just go out and play. Don't, it doesn't matter. And it's not an easy thing, some they say, oh well, but I'm feeling it. I said, well, try and embrace it. See, I tried to think of pressure or nerves as my friend, rather than something that I'm trying to get rid of, because as soon as you try and get rid of it, it actually increases the nerves and anxiety. So I try and think, well, actually, and then when I talk about performance, I think, well, don't think I've got to win. Get that thought out of your head completely. I think about possibilities. I said it's possible that I could win, and it's possible that I could not win, but that relieves me. It gives, because so often people think, well, if I think positive, then everything will be fine. But I know that I felt positive over a situation, and actually it hasn't turned out very well. So that doesn't leave me in a good place. So I just think about possibilities, and I try and, we'll talk to them about that. So that, I think, takes the pressure away a little bit, and then obviously point them back to our identity in Christ. And I think that once we get that, then we can experience God's peace and joy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, isn't it, about being able to share with each other our struggles, because actually it's about being real, acknowledging how you really feel, and being able to speak that out, but also then refocus yourself. As athletes, it's not just about just going in and not doing anything. We want to be intentional. We want to be putting things in place. What are we going to do well? How are we going to do it well? and knowing those things and taking hold of them. And like Ali was saying, stripping off all the other things that's not helping. Nerves is good. It is really good. You need it to be up, to be rising to that pressure of performing. But then there's that line, isn't there, where the nerves turn into anxieties, and it's not helpful, it's unhelpful. So it's recognizing where that line is, and then stripping off the things that are not helpful and going forward with the things that you can be putting in place.
Thanks so much, guys. I think it's just a really helpful conversation, and we know we're never going to get to the bottom of all of it in some senses, but hopefully really helpful. I think the two of the big things I'm hearing is that idea of perspective, which all comes from identity. If we're rooted and grounded in the fact that we are loved by the King of the universe, not because of anything we do, not because of how we perform, not because whether we win gold or silver or bronze, win a major, win a Solheim Cup, whatever it might be, or whatever it might be for you if you're listening in, that does not define us. It's a really helpful conversation to listen in. So thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully it's been a real help for you if you've been listening in. If you are an elite athlete, if you're maybe a young performance athlete on a pathway, you're a parent listening in, or you're an elite athlete yourself listening in, do get in touch. You can get in touch on our website. And we do, as we talked about, we're regularly looking to support and work with top level athletes to help them wrestle with some of these questions, to help them through these really pressurized times of their career where it's pretty full on. As we've heard, there's a real need there for people to be rooted and grounded and understanding more about who they are in Christ and what that looks like. So if that's you, do get in touch. Also on our website, we've got loads of resources. We've got podcasts like we talked about. If you're listening to it now, so you already know about this. We've got blogs, we've got Bible studies, looking at some of these particular issues, which may just really help you wrestle and think these through, as Debbie and Ali have said, in community with others, chat to others about it. That's a great joy. Thanks so much, Deb and Ali. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. We're going to keep diving into some of these top issues, like what it looks like to be a Christian in the world of sport. Till next time. See you later.